Right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this month's film program. I know that the Zoom link said that this took place tomorrow. I'm pretty sure I changed that date. I guess Zoom didn't know, but Zoom also didn't care because we're all here. So that's good. I am Liz from the information desk and one of Derry Public Library's big film people. I think it's me and Jess, with the two. And joining me tonight is not Todd. Todd is currently in the midst of dress rehearsals for his play. But Ellie is joining us once again. You might remember her from some of our past programs. Most recently, she guest hosted with Todd for David Lynch.
We love David Lynch in this house.
By the way, I don't know if Todd told you, he finished that Werner Herzog memoir, and he's like,
Oh Christ.
he's like, it's pretty good. He's gonna recommend it to my dad. I'm gonna see how that goes live and in person.
I'm sorry for the person he's becoming from the other book I recommended to him. Um,
He finished that one too. He actually finished it last night, I believe.
so good.
Yeah. We're here tonight to discuss The Room, and if any of you were here earlier, I was kind of saying this is a little bit of our friendship coming full circle, because about what, like
10 years ago.
11 years ago?
It was
No,
2013. I thought it was
No, he
2013.
got earlier than that.
Did we? I have no idea. Time is meaningless.
Yeah, no, post-pandemic time is meaningless, but I believe we met in the fall of 2011 at a screening of The Room. So this really is our friendship coming full circle.
Mm-hmm.
So us discussing the new cult classic midnight movie of the new millennium. I don't know if anyone here has actually watched The Room or heard of it. If you're all new to this, buckle up.
It's a movie. It is a film, really, a work of art.
I can't wait for Ellie to make like the actual like artistic argument. Well, not artistic, but there's an argument to be made for this film.
I can do. I'm not going to say that it's a good movie, but I can make an argument for it from an artistic perspective, which is almost as good.
Alrighty, well, we are going to get started. The Room, the Citizen Kane of bad movies. Now, this started.
I don't see the.
Oh, do you see it?
I don't see it now.
Oh, darn. Okay. Second.
Does anyone, any of the other people here see the slideshow?
Oh, I
don't see it. It's fine.
You know what? I forgot to do share screen. That's my fault. It's the holiday. You know what? We're in holiday season mode right now. There we go. Can you see it now?
I can see it now.
All right. Slideshow from beginning. There we go. Okay, I knew something was wrong. It's like something doesn't seem right. So Citizen Kane of bad movies. I forget who first coined this term. I first read it in Entertainment Weekly. But I believe, I don't know, this probably came from like a fan and someone just ran with it. But I think the art personally, I think the Citizen Kane of bad movies is Showgirls, but I think The Room is up there in the upper echelon of truly great bad.
If we're going with the premise of the Citizen Kane being the thing that establishes the genre rather than perfects it. It's going to have to be.
Good point.
It's going to have to be Plan 9, and you know I'm right.
Alrighty. So what is The Room? If you're not familiar with this, also, yes, this is the actual poster. We're not kidding. I mean, I think a recurring theme with this program is going to be, this is not a joke. Tommy Wiseau is actually like this. I have met Tommy Wiseau in person. He's legit this weird.
Yeah, to be clear about that eye thing, he's not doing that for the poster. I've met him too, and his eyes just do that. I think that's why he wears sunglasses all the time, because he's self-conscious about it.
Yeah, and like this isn't to make fun of someone who might have, I don't know what this is or what causes it, but I believe something that can be said about Tommy Wiseau is he is lacking at least some form of, or at least a fraction of self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
That, or maybe we were wrong and he knows that this is going to catch people's attention. But The Room is a 2003 passion project film. This was written, directed, produced by Tommy Wiseau. And it landed with a thud when it came out, but against all odds and good taste and decency, it became a hit. And this really is the new midnight movie cult hit of the new millennium. The guy who made Repo the Genetic Opera tried to reverse engineer his own Rocky Horror, and it really didn't take off. The Room took off because of the sincerity and just how weird it is.
To let you know how this movie's initial release went, there's a bit in the book about the making of this movie, which we will be talking from. We will be stealing notes from pretty consistently, I believe.
Oh, absolutely.
Where the writer is talking about its initial showing at the theater it was in, where there were just two signs underneath this poster. One, no refunds. Two, a review from a critic. Watching this film was like getting stabbed in the head.
Yep. We don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but we will discuss this.
We will.
So these are the people we will be talking about. The three names we will mention the most will be Tommy Wiseau, who is, again, writer, director, producer, and star of The Room, aka his character, Johnny. And Greg Sestero, who was a working actor kind of trying to claw his way up in LA, who was friends with Tommy Wiseau and ended up playing Mark in The Room. Juliet Danielle, who was an aspiring actress in LA. She played Lisa. She did not really have many roles after that. She has since stopped trying to act. I think she's like a realtor or something. She apparently got married, living a good life. Good for her. Also, Sandy Chaclair, I hope I'm saying that name correct. Was the assistant director on The Room. He claims that he was the one who actually directed it, which considering how erratic Tommy was on set, I think there is some credence to those claims. And then we're going to bring her up a few times. Carolyn Minot, who played Claudette. She plays Lisa's mother. We'll bring her up. And my favorite character in The Room, played by Dan Janjigian, who played Chris R. Who, again, Chris R. Best character, best moment in that movie, in my opinion.
Good scene.
Great scene. All on green screen in the background. It's so great. So pre-production, aka Tommy and Greg, before The Room really happened. So they did not meet in LA. They had actually met in an acting class. And if you'd seen the film The Disaster Artist, it dramatizes that. Greg is kind of drawn to Tommy, and this is something we couldn't say for Tommy Wiseau. There is something about him that's intriguing. So
he's got a thing going on.
He does. And if there's one thing he's really able to do, he's able to kind of talk himself up and hook people in to be a part of something. So he's moving, like, Tommy Wiseau had these dreams where, like, well, and so did Greg. Greg Sestero kind of wanted to model himself a little bit after, like, a James Dean type. And if you look at Greg Sestero, he is the one on the left. He's got kind of a Chris Evans look to him. Like, he's a guy who you could see maybe not being a big star, but making money in Hollywood. He could make commercial money. He's got, like, good boy next door looks.
If he'd like broken through, I don't know, 5 years later, like if he was 5 years younger and started this in like 2006, he could have been a CW guy.
Oh yeah. I was actually thinking that, like, he could have made a lot of money on a CW series with good looking 20-somethings.
Exactly.
Yeah. But Tommy Wiseau also kind of wanted to fashion himself after a James Dean, a Marlon Brando type. And if you've watched The Room, you know what? It's good to have a dream, Tommy. It's good to have a dream. But anyway, they both go to LA together. And Tommy is actually, for an actor kind of starting out like Greg, Tommy is a good friend to have because Tommy has money. We still don't, well, we'll get to it later. It's always been a little murky where Tommy got all of his money. Maybe he inherited it. Maybe, Sestero has kind of said, like, Tommy seemed to own property and at the very least invest wisely. There was also some talk that he got it from importing clothing. Oh no, it was
The Tommy Wiseau story has been reasonably solidly nailed down. Like there are enough
okay.
context clues that people staple together various details.
Yeah.
The section between when he gets to America, he's originally from, I think it's Eastern Europe,
Yeah, clearly
Poland.
Eastern Europe, we just don't know where.
We just don't know where. The section that where he arrives in America, and the section where he meets Greg Sestero and is now rich, extremely wealthy, owns a major building in downtown San Francisco.
Yeah.
Unknown. No one knows what happened in there, and he's not telling.
Yeah, no, and it very well might just be he comes from a family that has money or made a couple of good investment deals. I believe, remembering the disaster artist, he told Greg it was like, oh, importing leather jackets from Korea.
Yeah, that seems like a lie. Or if not a lie, then like he is skipping over some details.
Yeah, or I don't know, maybe he was a landlord or he just invested on the ground level of something. Who knows? But still, Wiseau, to his credit, lets Greg crash with him for free while Greg is trying to kind of get a foot in the door in Hollywood. And he gets a couple of commercial roles. He gets a part in the Puppet Master series. He gets enough to be in SAG and have an agent. And the agents, again, kind of took to him going like, you're a good looking guy. You got like the nice, even though he's from California, it's like, you got the nice Midwestern look. You'll do well. But Tommy, who is also trying to become an actor, get headshots, get parts, he is not doing as well. So it's Wiseau eventually leaves Los Angeles for a bit, goes on a sabbatical where he writes The Room. And I found an interview where it actually goes like, originally The Room, I wrote it as a play and then I wrote it as a book, and the book was over 500 pages and nobody wanted it. And I'm like, number one, that does not surprise me. But number two, my God, would I want to read that book?
One of the things we do have to make clear when it comes to Tommy Wiseau is you can never be certain how much of what he's saying is actually like any degree of true.
That's true.
He doesn't so much lie as like reinvent his reality. According to the disaster artist, a lot of The Room is based heavily on a viewing of The Talented Mr. Ripley, of all things.
Yes, that's a good. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
Which is a good movie, but like.
But there is, and I mean, Talented Mr. Ripley, I think there was someone broke Tommy Wiseau's heart at some point in time.
I will get into that when I talk about its artistic merits.
Yep. But yeah, they actually do end up, we're going to get into a part of this which does not paint Tommy Wiseau in a great light, and he deserves to be held accountable for that. But there's also some very good and genuinely generous aspects to Tommy Wiseau. And when it came to like Greg Sestero kind of said like, hey, it was great to have someone letting me stay here rent free while I was trying to make it as an actor. It was incredibly, helpful. So do want to highlight that, but yeah, it was so sick. This book for The Room, almost 500 pages. I'm like, oh boy. Is this? There we go. So what is The Room about? And of course I had to go, what a story, Mark. Unfortunately, we can't play too many clips from The Room at all because Tommy Wiseau is very litigious and we do not want to get a copyright strike against the library. So can't play them. But this movie is about kind of going to what I just said, like, oh, this someone broke Tommy Wiseau's heart at some point. He always claims it's inspired by like a Tennessee Williams style story. And if you do watch this movie, you can kind of see it. It's got like the love triangle. It has these big emotional scenes. It has all these side characters dealing with their own personal issues. Like Denny apparently either deals drugs or uses drugs. Someone has breast cancer. That is Lisa's mother. And then but here's the thing. These things are never mentioned again. They're brought up one time and then they're gone. But this story, the main story is between Johnny, who is played by Tommy Wiseau, who is great at his job. Everybody loves him. He has a ton of friends. He's the sole breadwinner. And he's engaged to Lisa, who is, and again, this is nothing against Juliet Danielle, but Lisa in the universe of The Room is the most ungrateful harpy you could ever imagine. She just out of nowhere decides she's bored with Johnny and begins an affair with Mark, Johnny's best friend, who is played by, on the right, Greg Sestero. Apologies, I'm still getting over a cold. I got a cold for the first time in like 4.5 years. It's not great. I tested and I thought it was COVID when it wasn't. I was like, it's not COVID. What is it? And I'm like, oh, is this what colds are like? Oh, I forgot that.
Yeah, they suck.
They do. They're terrible. So the making of The Room. John, Tommy Wiseau comes back from his sabbatical. He's got a script for The Room and he's like, I'm going to make a movie. Greg, do you want to make a movie with me? And Greg, who's like, okay, number one, this guy was a great friend to me. Number two, who knows? This is experience. Maybe this movie will make it big.
There is also...
Yeah.
Oh, no. I was simply going to say, like, there is also, again, going back to the disaster artist, Greg Sestero, who plays Mark, wrote The Disaster Artist, which is the book about the making of The Room. Johnny offered him an unspecified amount of money that is high enough that Sestero is unwilling to specify how much it is to be in the movie, which I think is kind of evidence of what kind of person Tommy Wiseau can be sometimes.
They kind of are the same personality.
They are the same person.
Yeah. So it was, hey, I'd have money, but also, and when he writes the book, he's like, this could be, he's like, he was somewhat realistic about what this movie could be, to Sestero's credit, but he also just like, I don't know, it's a credit, it's experience. And, again, there's a protectiveness that Sestero does have of Wiseau, where even when Sestero is honest about some of Wiseau's less than endearing qualities, he does try to kind of explain them away. Well, not explain them away, but try to balance them with like, well, but then there's also, he's done this good thing. But, human beings are complicated. Our relationship to other human beings are complicated. But yeah, in terms of speaking of money, there's a substantiated amount of money, which is $6 million, which I love this quote. And I think this is from Sestero himself in an interview where he was like, poured $6 million into this disastrous specimen of cinematic hubris called The Room. But Wiseau wanted to go like the full 9 yards. He wanted to write, he wanted to direct, he produced it. Like if you ever do sit down and watch this movie, the opening logo just says like Tommy's World. But he rented out a studio and he brought a director package for cameras. So it included 35 millimeter film and then high def cameras. So he shot on HD and on film. He shot on 2 cameras at once. And this is also where Sandy Charlotte, how do you say his last name? I'm just going to call him Sandy. Sandy, the assistant director, came in. He was hired by Tommy Wiseau to assistant direct the film and be a script supervisor. And he has also some of the stuff with the disaster artist he corroborates because, to Sestero's credit, he is very honest about the fact that Tommy Wiseau was not great on set and was very erratic. But then there's also things where Sandy has kind of said, like, Tommy was so erratic, he couldn't remember his lines, he kept changing stuff in the script. I pretty much directed the movie for him. And what about you, Ellie? I think there's some validity to that.
I mean, I'll get into this a little bit when I talk about the movie as an auteur piece of art. Yeah, I'm serious. The question of whether or not Sandy handled the physical act of figuring out sight lines and setting up shots and doing the stuff that a director on a normal, well put together film set would do, I think that there is some validity to that. But if we are using director as a synecdoche for authorship, no, the film is authored by Tommy Wiseau in a way that is inextricable from the act of directing. Obviously, Tommy Wiseau didn't direct the film very competently. He had never directed anything in his life. And he does not, one of the things that you're not going to get from hearing us talk about it, Tommy Wiseau does not speak English very well. English is by by debating, depending on what your account is, either his third or fourth language, and it sounds like it.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, to his credit, he speaks English better than I could probably speak a majority of other languages.
right. That's always the case, but he doesn't have very good English, and he's not really interested in learning. He is, in fact, one of the things that I do find a little less charming about him, aside from his abusive qualities, is that he is a distinctly uncurious person. Um, and he's also, by all accounts, extremely stubborn when regardless of whether or not he's right. So he would just like say, I want to do it this way, and people would eventually be like, fine, we'll do it that way, just get the argument over with.
Yeah, like one of the things he wanted to do was he wanted to shoot on green screen for their rooftop scenes. And they were like, why do we need green screen for a rooftop scene? We could shoot on a roof.
We can just go find a roof.
Yeah, we could find a location. Yeah, there wasn't a lot of location scouting for the room. But beyond incompetence, again, there's chaos on the set. Carolyn Minogue, who is an older woman, she played Lisa's mother in the movie. She had at least one where it was so hot and there was no air conditioning. She almost had to go. Did she have to go to the hospital or almost go?
She briefly collapsed from heat exhaustion, and they took her to the hospital because, in addition to being extremely litigious, Tommy Wiseau was terrified of being sued.
Well, you know what? Hey, good for him. But he was very abusive to people on set, most notably Juliet Danielle, who this is also extremely not even awkward, but not great to learn when you consider the fact that Juliet Danielle plays his girlfriend, and there are multiple sex scenes in that movie. And while they are funny, again, can't show them for obvious reasons, but one of the jokes that came out of them was, is that her belly button? I don't think that's how this is supposed to work. I'll leave it there. But Juliet Danielle was like 19, 20 at the time. She had not really had a role before. And even by Sestero's account, when she was cast, like one of her first scenes to shoot, she had to be completely nude and was so practically jumped on her and would berate her and call her ugly in front of a set full of people. And this is dramatized in the film version of The Disaster Artist, to the point where other members of the crew started screaming at Tommy Wiseau and telling him to stop.
He does want to be an auteur. He has to treat his female leads like
yeah, no, it's really it's one where I can kind of, knowing that, I can see why Juliet Danielle just decided, I'm done acting. I mean, this would ruin it for me too. And other casting crew quit. There were a lot of other people that had quit in terms of the cast. The woman who played Lisa's friend had been replaced 3 or 4 times before we finally got that actress. But most notably is actor Kyle Vaught, who plays the character of Peter. He's supposed to be a psychologist, just disappears from the movie after a while. And then there's another guy that comes in for one scene playing Steven. But if you watch the movie, you can tell he is supposed to be playing Peter. You could have just rewritten it to be like, oh, new person coming in, but nope.
He does it. The film does kind of like half-heartedly try to write in a scene where he finds out all the information Peter needs to know, but it's like, it is literally like 8 minutes before credits roll. Why are you introducing a character now?
Yeah, it's, again, competence is an issue here. And by the end of the shoot, pretty much everyone just kind of figured this movie's not going to see the light of day. At least no one has to ever see this. But they were wrong.
A lot of movies with this kind of like level of dysfunction just don't ever get finished.
And yet, again, against all odds, here we are. 2003, The Room does premiere June 27th. It's at the Lamel Fairfax Theater and the Fallbrook Theater in Los Angeles. Tommy Wiseau wanted the movie to play long enough to qualify for the Oscars. Again, keep dreaming that dream. And he paid for 5 years, $5,000 a month to have that billboard up. And one of the articles I read, like looking on the Wayback Machine, one of the first articles about The Room was in 2006. And it's like, what is the deal with this billboard and what's the movie behind it? So yeah, not a hit with audiences, not a hit with critics. This is from Scott Foundas from Variety. Called him, quote, a narcissist nonpareil whose whose movie makes Vincent Gallo's The Brown Bunny. I feel this is twice in the calendar year I brought up The Brown Bunny, because I brought it up for the Roger Ebert program as well. Seemed like the apotheosis of cinematic self-restraint, and wrote, given audiences' reaction at the screening attended, Pick may be something of a first, a movie that prompts its viewers to ask for their money back before even 30 minutes have passed, which led to, as you said earlier, no refunds.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of that comparison to Brown Bunny because it's entirely unfair. The Room is way more interesting than the Brown Bunny, and like half as long.
That's true. Well, hey, I mean, Roger Ebert did review the re-edited version and said it's actually a little bit better. So maybe we could give it a
shorter.
shot. Well, again, hey, as I discussed in my program, you don't have to agree with Roger Ebert on everything.
I know.
But
don't.
Even though it doesn't do well initially, it starts to gain a following. So it's in Los Angeles, meaning it's in Hollywood. So some of the first people who saw this movie were industry people. And while industry people looked at it and said, this movie's awful, you know who else lives in LA? A whole lot of comedy actors and comedians. So people like Paul Rudd, David Cross, Kirsten Bell were some of the first people on the ground floor to be like, this movie is hysterical. You have to see it. Kirsten Bell, I think, would host screening parties for it. David Cross was, I think, one of the first, quote, he's not Brad Pitt big, but he's the first like big figure to kind of talk about it and go like, man, you got to see this. This is bad, but it's also amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And as as early as 2006, it started to get profiled, and NPR actually talked about the growing fandom of this movie. And it's like, yeah, it's staying in this theater in LA. People are going to see it. They love it. And kind of like it's becoming a new Rocky Horror Picture Show type of film. There is a great moment from that NPR article, though. So it says, they're talking about, was this movie made to be bad or was this sincere? Now, from the article, quote, but Wiseau does insist that any unintentional humor was intended, that he wanted to provoke the audience into interacting with the movie. But fan John Dalton isn't buying it. And this is from John Dalton. I don't know if he is self-deluded or if he actually believes that. He meant it to be an Edward Albee, Tennessee Williams type of thing. And it is all those things, but done horribly. And yeah, I'm with that. I feel the same way with Showgirls. There's been kind of this rewriting of Showgirls to be like, oh no, it was meant to be this funny, satirical, intentionally bad movie. And I'm like, I can buy that for certain things, but there's too many moments in that movie where I'm like, oh no, Joe Esterhaus thought he was saying something here.
I mean,
I think what?
No, go, you finish what you can say, and then I'll say what I'm gonna say.
Well, I think the best you could say for Showgirls is Paul Verhoeven realized he had a turkey on his hands, and he's like, well, I guess I just got to go broad and go crazy. And like I think you could argue like Kyle MacLachlan and Gina Gershon, they knew they had a turkey on their hands. But you read that script, Joe Esterhaus thought he was making a point. And I think the same goes for The Room.
One of the problems with Showgirls, down to its very DNA, is like all of the actors are on very different wavelengths, and the big one is the lead. Oh God, what is her name?
Elizabeth Berkley. How dare you?
Elizabeth Berkley is doing a really intensely sincere, emotional performance that is A, entirely out of her range, and B, extremely wrong for the material. And like, I do think that there is an element where some people were trying to make it more campy and fun, but you can't like get around the other half of the script.
Exactly. Well, for me, that is why Showgirls is my favorite bad movie.
and The Room is the same thing. Like, I don't know. Again, Tommy Wiseau, I don't know the man, so I don't want to psychoanalyze him. He does seem like a person who is either very adept at lying or extremely adept at lying to himself. So I don't know if he believes that he intended The Room to be a black comedy all along, but there are no intentional elements of comedy in the film,
Oh no.
in my opinion. There's no jokes, there's no surprise subversions or anything.
No, it's as someone who's seen this film at least I think 10 times.
Nerd.
We're really gonna compare
You
notes here. Don't worry, it's all in good fun. Yeah, it is definitely a oh, you tried and you failed. Oh no. But again, I think that's what makes the room also endearing in a way.
Mhm.
But going back to the fandom, 2009 Adult Swim, which if you're not familiar with what Adult Swim is, Cartoon Network, which is a TV channel. I don't know who might be watching this. TV channels are things that exist that's not streaming. That's their after hours block. It usually starts around 10, 11 at night. So for their April Fool's Day showing, they showed The Room. They had to block off certain parts of it for content, but they showed that, and that kind of helped get it even more into the cultural conversation. And Adult Swim, especially at that time, was they were kind of into that so bad it's good stuff.
I mean, Adult Swim even to this day does tend to put raunchier, more subversive stuff up.
Yeah.
It's where they air Rick and Morty there, they air Harley Quinn there.
Yeah.
But also
Robot
like
Chicken.
Robot Chicken, they were also at that point very into just putting weird stuff on for no reason. Like that was the era of Too Many Cooks, very famously.
And Tim and Eric.
Tim and Eric.
Yeah.
Tim and Eric were a big proponent of The Room.
Yeah. Tim and Eric, for those not aware, Tim Heidecker, who's a comedian, Tim and Eric was like one of his things.
Tim Heidecker and Eric Wareheim, yeah. Mm-hmm. They're deeply strange comedians.
I just to go quick tangent, but Tim Heidecker's like current online stuff is some of the funniest stuff I've ever seen. His Bill Maher-esque interview, his Bill Maher spoof interview with Fred Armisen is so funny. I think I've watched it 5 times so far. So good. It gets so perfect. But yeah, and then kind of around the same time as the first Adult Swim airing, we start to see The Room go national, and other countries start to have these screenings, including the first screening I went to, which was in late 2009 at the Coolidge Corner Theater. And that image of Greg Sestero at a screening, that is Greg at the Coolidge Corner Theater. So I kind of mentioned this a few times. The Room is sort of the heir to the Rocky Horror Picture Show's throne, not in terms of its content, but in terms of the audience participation aspect. So there are costumes. There aren't a ton of costumes you can do from The Room. They're certainly not as fun as Rocky Horror Picture Show, but you can dress in a tuxedo carrying a football. You can wear the red dress that Lisa wears. You can wear a beanie and a wife beater. And although I don't think you can do this anymore, carry a fake gun like Chris R.
Yeah, that's a bummer.
Yeah, you can't do that anymore. Not after 2012.
Yeah, there are also a lot of props. Liz mentions here the plastic spoons.
Yep.
Because for reasons that I mean, they're not very interesting. They found a bunch of stock photos to fill the apartment with, and Tommy Wiseau, being lazy, never got them to change out the pictures of spoons that were in the stock photos. So people threw plastic spoons at the screen.
Yeah.
Which you actually probably shouldn't do, because I'm sure that's
well, as I put here, I think by the time you and I went to that Avon screening, they were like, please don't throw footballs, or please don't throw footballs. You can actually hurt the screen.
And I think they also banned spoons because they like the Avon, which is the theater that we attended. It's a nonprofit theater, and like we don't want to keep our people to 3 a.m. cleaning up spoons.
Yeah. Coolidge, I believe, has done that as well. Actually, just a fun bit of inside knowledge, baseball for any people who go to the theater. The Coolidge Corner Theater Brookline, I know for a fact that the guy who does some of the programming, he hates The Room. So do a lot of the people that work there, and a lot of it was mainly because of the cleanup, and some of it because of the fans. But they're like, whatever, it's a moneymaker, and it helps us fund other things. So and then the call and response is what we see the most. So there are multiple shots of the Golden Gate Bridge. People will yell "go" There's also like the misogyny in this film is a lot. And there is a lot of call and response that tries to, poke fun at the misogyny. So the because you're a woman, whenever Lisa and Claudette say anything, is kind of where that comes up. But they're also, I believe they've been kind of left in the 2010s as we've gone forward. But there used to be some more misogynistic things yelled at Lisa, where even again theater owners cracked down on that. I think even Greg Sestero at one point was like, "Yeah, don't do that. Like, leave Juliette Danielle alone."
She had a rough time. She doesn't
Yeah,
deserve this.
yeah. Like, so that's thankfully I think kind of been left behind. The cheap, Johnny's imitation of a chicken, which is thankfully more accurate than any Arrested Development character's impersonation of a chicken. And my personal favorite is whatever, because this takes place in San Francisco. There are multiple shots of just the townhouses, the very famous San Francisco townhouses. Whenever there's a shot of that, people start singing the Full House theme.
Everywhere you look.
Yep.
I've never watched a minute of Full House, and I intend to keep it that way.
I think I've watched like one episode, but that theme song via cultural osmosis is just in my brain.
Mine too.
But yeah, so it's the new Rocky Horror. It's kind of weird that the new Rocky Horror is this, but again, you can never predict what films actually become phenomenons. And now we get to the disaster artist, which Ellie, you and I were talking about this a month ago, or a month and a half, when we realized, oh no, Todd's gonna be at Sound of Music. We can't do the program we initially were gonna do, so tag in time. But you'd mentioned Tommy Wiseau wasn't happy when this book came out, but Tommy Wiseau should be counting his blessings that it was Greg that wrote the tell-all and not anyone else.
There were several. I mean, from what I can tell, a lot of this is like industry scuttlebutt that I don't officially know so much as just know. A lot of people from the room were kind of like trying to get their version of the story out.
I know Sandy wrote his own version as well.
Right. Greg Sestero's kind of wound up. He started working on his earliest, and also because he had the pre and post relationship with Wiseau, he kind of just got the actual publisher's attention fastest. But yes, Tommy Wiseau is famously deeply unhappy about this book. He will, like, again, industry scuttlebutt, he will supposedly get extremely angry if you ask him about stuff from this book. But Liz is correct. If Juliette Danielle had wrote this book, he would have been hacked to pieces.
Yeah. No, there would be conversations of, can we still enjoy the room?
Mm-hmm.
There would be pieces.
There is, and there is an element of that. There is a lot of very, very bad stuff in this film. He is pretty consistent, and even to Greg. Like, Greg Sestero is there, and there's several moments where I'm reading this, and he's like talking about how okay he is with Tommy. I'm like, bestie, you are being emotionally abused by this man.
Yeah.
But Juliette Danielle isn't telling people not to. So if she wanted to say don't go see the movie, and by all accounts she doesn't get any residuals, because of course she doesn't, because
yeah. I mean, like, it's, I think most of the people in the room now just kind of own it. They're like, yep, I was in the room. Hey.
I don't think any of the people I don't want to say their careers suffered because of it, because if you had a career to ruin by being in it, you would not have been in that movie. So supposedly the guy who played Chris R was like an Olympic rower or something.
Yeah, he had something. No, he went really method for his role. He really thought, like, this is going to get me noticed. I'm going to have it in my reel. And it's like, oh, well, it got you noticed.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah. And they're, again, the closest Greg, I don't know if he's the closest person to Tommy Wiseau. Again, we don't know Tommy Wiseau personally. He might have a whole family life that we're just unaware of, but Sestero does try to kind of piece together like who Tommy Wiseau is, because even Greg's kind of like, it's really weird that this guy has a lot of money and doesn't tell me where it came from. And I mean, I would be that way too. Look, I've watched The Sopranos. I've seen a couple mob movies. I don't want to get involved with a mob person and then potentially get wrapped up in something I have no part of.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a very he's ultimately fairly forgiving of Tommy, where it's like, even from what I could find from Sandy's book, I'm like, man, if even Sandy's book got optioned, I think the conversation we'd be having around this movie would be very different.
It is a much more fond book than I think anyone else's book would have been, and I think that the structure of the book, which is one chapter about the production of the room, and then one chapter about Tommy and Greg's relationship before they making the room, is a very good structure to keep you from getting hating Tommy Wiseau too much.
Yeah. And as I said right here, option for a film adaptation, and there have been a lot of people vying to make it, but the person who got it was someone we haven't heard from quite a while, James Franco.
Hey, he went really method on it too. He decided he was going to abuse some women.
Yeah, so yeah, as you can see on the slide, it was kind of it came out, and then like a month after it came out, a lot of allegations against James Franco started to surface, although it was ones where that was stuff where even when this movie was being made, it was kind of you would hear people going like, oh, he's kind of like people going like, well, he's a good person to play Tommy Wiseau because he's a creep. And
I live
yeah,
outside of New York City. The fact that not Greg's sister, that James Franco is a creep was an open secret. That is all I will say.
yeah. It's and it was funny because he'd been trying to be like a big serious director for like a decade, and then he finally directs a good movie. I will say this, all the problems I have with James Franco aside, I think The Disaster Artist is a pretty good film. It's fun, it's entertaining, it's really well cast.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, man, you finally succeeded in making a good movie. Irony that it's this. But then again, allegations surfaced, and James Franco just hasn't really been seen much anymore outside of that Ballad of Buster Scruggs.
He kind of dropped off the earth, yeah.
Yeah, which compared to some other people, it's like, well, at least he had enough self-awareness to go, okay, maybe I should just leave.
At least he's at the same compound that Bryan Singer is in.
But yeah, I would actually, even more so than The Room, I'd say like The Disaster Artist is a fun watch.
Mm-hmm.
Although it does, I mean, if we're just talking about accuracy, the end of the movie made it seem like it was an immediate comedic hit where it's like, oh no, it was not. I mean, people were laughing at it, but it didn't become a phenomenon. People laughed at it and then left. They're like, this is one of the worst things I've seen in my life. Although the actress playing Juliet Danielle kind of like hiding her head in her hands. I'm like, she was like, nope, that really happened. I wanted to die. But I did manage to get, again, I know I can't show too many clips of The Room just on account of Tommy Wiseau being litigious, but I did manage to find a good clip of some side-by-sides of The Room and The Disaster Artist.
Not hit her. It's not true. It's bullshit. I did not hit her. I did not. Oh, hi, Mark. Oh, hi, Mark.
You're scary.
You are lying. I never hit you. You are please stop.
Why are you so hysterical?
Do you understand why? Do you? Peter, you're clumsy. That's it. I'm done.
Fun fact, that's actor's last line in the movie.
Hi.
Can I help you?
Yeah, can I have a dozen red roses, please?
Oh, hi, Johnny. I didn't know it was you.
Oh,
Who
but
else
I
would
will
it
never
be?
get over the camera angle of just Peter falling headfirst to the ground. Again, there's almost an auteur thing to that of like, it almost
I'm getting
becomes
there.
art. Well, actually, before we go into follow-ups, well, no, we'll talk about that at the end. Quickly on follow-ups, there have been attempts to recapture the magic of the room, and just none of them really have worked. I remember when The House That Dripped Blood on Alex was gonna happen, everyone was really excited, and then they watched it and they're like, well, that wasn't that great. The Neighbors is kind of meh. Well, you said Best Friends has some merit. I haven't watched Best Friends.
Best Friends is interesting for a very similar reason that The Room is interesting artistically. We will talk about it in a moment.
Okay. And then there is Big Shark, which is out right now. Wiseau's doing a lot to kind of promote that. But again, it's another one where it's like, now that he's in on the joke, it doesn't work as well versus like when I saw Tommy Wiseau in person, it was in 2010 at Brookline. And again, there was that idea of like, is this man serious? Oh God, he is. Like, I still remember someone asking him a question like, who inspires you as a filmmaker? And his response is just like, well, that's a stupid question. That's like asking who inspires you to eat breakfast. And it's like such an off the wall answer. Versus now, I think about 20 years after this movie, I think he's fully almost into playing a character mode. And again, it's kind of like, this is why if you're in on the joke, it doesn't work as well.
Definitely.
And now The Room in 2023. So I don't know. I mean, the screenings I don't think happen as much anymore. They still they used to be monthly at the Coolidge Corner at the Coolidge. They're now more like, I think, once a season. There was a Fathom 20th anniversary screening for it. Bob Odenkirk did a full remake for it. It was for Acting for a Cause, but I still loved it. Like, there is technically a remake for The Room, and it stars Bob Odenkirk, who's just a great actor. But it's still, I think it still overall works as a bad movie. But again, it's really one of those lightning in a bottle moments where I don't think we're gonna see anything like that from Wiseau ever again. Because he has some self-awareness now, and well, that just ruins all the fun.
That's not what makes it good.
Yeah, and you wanted to talk about the artistic defense of The Room. So like 20 years out, what is your view of The Room as a work of art?
So one of the main film theories that people use to apply to movies is something called auteur theory. I know Liz knows this, but I'm explaining to the audience. Auteur theory posits that the director is the ultimate author of the film. And in most cases, I think auteur theory is kind of BS. Because any film of any reasonable size is going to be going through so many filters, studios and another writer and actors who have their own say, that it's very hard to say that any one person is the author of a film. And Tommy Wiseau is so unfiltered in this movie. The only creator who I think is as consistently able to keep himself unfiltered as Wiseau is in this film is Tyler Perry. And if you want to know what I think of Tyler Perry, the Mr. Sugar storyline from Atlanta is like the best thing written about Tyler Perry ever. And that sort of, you look at the plot of The Room where this guy, and there is a lot of people posit, and including Greg Sestero, that this is based on an actual breakup that Wiseau had. And lots of people write and direct movies about their breakups. Marriage Story is a really excellent movie about a relationship in collapse, supposedly based on the director's own divorce, right? But there are filters there. He has a level of self-awareness that I think means that you can't really see into the way that I think that a lot of people, men in particular, view their partners when they start to be less than perfect in their mind. Tommy Wiseau writes himself as this perfect guy who never does anything wrong, and then his girlfriend decides to cheat on him for no reason and ruin his life. And that's silly, but if you listen to the way people, again, lots of men in particular, talk about breakups, that's what they'll just say about their girlfriend. Oh, she just turned out to be some crazy bitch. And so I think that by taking a director who is so unself-aware and so unable to filter himself, you can accidentally get a really good look at the mindset of that sort of person. And that's the same reason why I feel like Best Friends kind of has a little bit of merit, because Wiseau is so bitter at Greg Sestero for writing The Disaster Artist. That bitterness starts to seep into the piece itself. It's not as, there were more filters in place there at that point. But I don't think it's like a good movie, but as a look at how people view their partners after you even have a few arguments, that's interesting. That's an interesting look, and it's unfiltered in a way that I don't think most other movies could be. That's my take.
Now, well, thank you for that. And again, when you first told me about that, I'm like, wow, I have never thought of it before, but I'm like, this is just the unfiltered. I don't know what happened. She just turned out to be crazy in film form.
To be clear, don't watch the movie looking for that. I like Jerry, the Gus Van Sant movie about two people walking in the desert for 2 hours. I am deep into the Art Alice brain poisoning at this point.
I know, you just watch this movie for laughs. And before we go, questions we all have: who is Tommy Wiseau? No one knows how old he is. We have an idea of what country he could be from. Somewhere in the former Eastern Bloc is where we've narrowed it down. We still don't quite know how he made all of his money. And if he's legal.
I think the Eastern Bloc got narrowed down to Poland, which is the specific. I don't want to be like this direct, but the specific ways in which he messes up English are very reminiscent of native Polish speakers.
Okay, all right. And people have always asked if that's a wig or not. I mean, I personally think that's his real hair, but I could see people thinking it's a wig. But yeah, it is interesting. This guy has been in the public eye for almost 20 years. And he still manages to keep up. For me, him keeping the money thing is like, I almost feel like it has to be legal, where he just made some good investments, because you'd think by now, if there was something really shady going on, someone would have figured it out. Some reporter, like in the days when Gawker existed, would want to be the one who cracked the Tommy Wiseau case.
The comparison I can make is like the writer. There's a very famous Twitter account that posts like weird little comedy tweets called Drill.
Yes.
And for reasons that I'm not going to go into, people found out his real name because he did some writing work for a video game. And basically everyone's like, oh, he's just some guy. And just everyone agreed to just not talk about it. So I think that's basically what happened with the money. Like someone probably has pieced it together and realized like, oh, this is illegal. Okay.
Well, again, that's why I'm like, if it was illegal, I think we would have heard by now.
Mm-hmm. Or the government would have come knocking, yeah.
Hell yeah, taxman knocking on the door. And with that, yes, actual line from the movie, everybody.
It is extremely hard to say that line sincerely. Any questions?
Yeah, any questions? Oh, you put it for context. Coen Brothers budget for Miller's Crossing was $5 million. $5 million, way better spent.
And Miller's Crossing rules.
The movie does seem to be really bad. It is. I would recommend watching it at least once, though. It's a
don't watch it alone. It's not interesting.
Yeah, watch it with people. It's a great movie to watch at a party where everyone's here to laugh at it. Or if you would like to not waste your time on a bad movie, again, I'd recommend The Disaster Artist. I think it's a pretty good movie. Or we have the book here at the library.
The Disaster Artist, the book, is an amazing read. It's one of those I think that you can actually read the book and appreciate it without having seen the movie.
Oh yeah. No, I would say that too. Like, I think because when I was looking through the reviews for it, like a lot of people they're like, oh yeah, I've never seen this movie, but I get a sense of what it was like on the set. And so yeah, no, it's good. Again, I don't know, Ellie, I don't know if I ever got your opinion on the Disaster Artist movie. What did you think of it?
I think it's an interesting. I think it's interesting to take the levels of irony that aren't there in the movie that make it such a fascinating piece of art and then reattach them because whatever even back before we knew that James Franco was a POS, he's a deeply ironic human being. He's
Yeah.
not capable of doing something unironically, I don't feel. And so I find that interesting. I don't know if I really like it. Um, it's very funny. It's okay. Rephrase that. I don't know if I like it as like a piece of art with depth and meaning. It is a very funny comedy.
I know, and I think all the performers, all the actors are top notch. Like
The actors are doing a great job, especially the guy playing Greg Sestero.
yeah,
And I don't know. It's hard to call what Franco is doing a performance so much as an imitation, but it's a good
Yeah.
imitation. It's an extremely, having sat regardless of your politics, I think that we can all agree, man, I'm really tired of hearing people think that they've got a good Trump impression. And that's the same, and film people are the same with Tommy Wiseau. So hearing someone actually do a good Wiseau impression is refreshing. It's about 90 minutes, Diane.
Oh yeah, I was like, it's about 99 minutes.
I don't think bad movies, I think the reason why bad books never took off in the way that bad movies can is because I think if a bad movie, like Heaven's Gate is a bad movie, but it's also like 3.5 hours long, and I'm not devoting my time to that.
Yeah. Whereas you're like, oh, a bad movie that's 90 minutes, I can do that. Whereas like a book, it's like, oh, how long is it gonna take me to read this? I'm not doing that.
Exactly.
That's why Twilight, I tried and I got like 50 pages in, and I'm like, there's other things I can read. Goodbye, book.
Like the most important literary work of the last 5 years, Garth Marenghi's Terror Tome.
Oh, honey, you know they don't know who Garth Marenghi is.
Should.
um yeah, but yeah, so thank you everyone for coming. Next month is going to be Snowed in Cinema, definitely a fun topic. Just movies that take place in the snow. We're going to talk about why the snow works so much as a setting, also why snow and horror seem to go together pretty well, because that's actually something I've been seeing over and over again. I'm like, a lot of horror movies use snow. I wonder if that has something to do with isolation.
I'm gonna try to convince Liz to do a shout out to the ice storm because I lived in
Oh
the
no,
town
I am
that's
going to talk
setting.
about I am going to talk about the ice storm. It's a good movie. I like that movie.
It is a good movie, and I lived where it's set.
Like one of the few times Katie Holmes is watchable.
Rough.
Now she's one of the worst actresses that I think got in front of a camera for more than one movie.
Rough. So good night, everybody.
Prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. And then January 2023, we are going to be doing January 2024, we are going to be doing the best of 2023, not just giving our top 10 list. We're also going to talk about budgets of the year, big movies of the year. We're going to talk about the strikes. Hey, the strikes are over now.
Movies are back.
I did not think the actors would last longer than the writers. I was actually pretty surprised by that. And we will, of course, talk about the big cultural juggernaut of the year, which was Barbenheimer. And I believe both Oppenheimer and Barbie are going to be on both of Ellie and I's top 10 lists.
Barbie is pretty much unshakable at this point. It's still at number 3 or 4, honestly.
Yeah, it's still in my top 5. Oppenheimer's getting moved to the back, and I'm like, oh, I feel bad, but
Oppenheimer could theoretically get pushed off, especially since I decided I liked Bottoms more.
Yeah, again, I'm waiting to see what happens with Poor Things, Zone of Interest, and Boy and the Heron, because I'm like, oh, that might just really mess up my top 5. But with that, we are gonna say goodnight. Thank you everyone for attending.
Bye.